I stopped reminding my parents about my wedding to see if they'd notice, and they never did. Now they're facing public shame and divorce. So, I'm Natalie, 27, and I have a younger brother named Ryan, who is 21. Ryan is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always complaining, always expecting everyone around him to drop everything for him, just an overall exhausting human being to be near. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him endlessly, and not because there was any real reason for it. He is not special needs, did not have a difficult birth, had no traumatic experiences that might explain the way they treated him. He was simply born, and the moment he arrived, my parents completely discarded me. My mother, Sandra, 50, was the worst of the two. She went from being a warm, attentive mom to one of those women who center their entire identity around their son to a degree that becomes genuinely embarrassing to witness. My father, Paul, 50, still showed me some love and support over the years, but he has always been far too conflict-averse to stand up to my mother and defend me even once. The only person who ever truly had my back was my grandfather, Grandpa Walt, 76, who never sugarcoated what he saw happening and never pretended to like Ryan. He used to say I reminded him of my late grandmother, and we built a very close bond over the years because of it. The problem was that he lived on the other side of the country, so I could only see him a handful of times a year. Ryan has always known that Sandra prefers him, and he has always loved using that knowledge against me. Because of his attitude and the constant favoritism, we have been at odds for as long as I can remember. He is spoiled, entitled, and seems to find genuine satisfaction in making my life harder. I lost count years ago of how many times I ended up in trouble for things I did better than him, or for situations he deliberately set me up to take the blame for. His one legitimate talent is basketball. He was good enough to earn a scholarship to a well-regarded university out of state, which my parents celebrated as though it were a national achievement. My parents did not spend a single dollar on my education. I was told for years that my college fund had been wiped out by unexpected household expenses following a leak that damaged part of the house. I believed that for a long time. It was only much later that I found out the money had been quietly redirected to Ryan, used first to buy him a car for his 16th birthday, and later to cover the deposit on an apartment near his university when he started his freshman year. They had not spent it all at once, which is why the lie held up as long as it did. They simply stored the money and drew from it over time while telling me it no longer existed. It was at my state university that I met my husband, Daniel. He was the first person I felt genuinely drawn to when I arrived there, though it took several years of close friendship before either of us acknowledged what was actually developing between us. Through Daniel and the group of friends we built together, I finally managed to get out of my parents' house and start a life that felt like mine. Both of us have built solid careers since then, and we are financially stable and genuinely happy, something I am aware is not a small thing, given where I started. Daniel proposed to me about a year ago. We are private people, so we did not post it on social media or make any kind of announcement. When I told my parents in person, Sandra responded with a flat, "That's nice," and my father gave a vague nod, and then the conversation moved on. Looking back, I do not think they actually registered what I had said. We planned a ceremony that was simple but meaningful, close family, our real friends, people who had actually been present in our lives. Daniel encouraged me to invite my parents and Ryan, and I did. I sent formal paper invitations to everyone on our guest list and received confirmation that all of them had been delivered. I heard back from nearly everyone. From my parents and Ryan, I received nothing. When I visited and tried to bring up the wedding in conversation without explicitly naming it as a wedding, Sandra would talk over me about Ryan's latest accomplishments. When I finally ran out of patience and interrupted to tell her directly that I was organizing an event on a fixed date, she told me they could not come because Ryan had an important game that weekend and the family needed to be there for him. This was not surprising. Sandra and Paul had missed my dance recitals, my high school graduation, and both my undergraduate and graduate ceremonies, all for reasons that circled back to Ryan. So at that point I decided to stop insisting. I told them it was no problem if they could not make it to this particular event, deliberately left out the word wedding, and let it go. I got married a few weeks later. It was genuinely perfect. Daniel's family was there, my paternal relatives were there, our closest friends filled the room. Grandpa Walt flew across the country and walked me down the aisle, which meant more to me than I know how to properly explain. When people asked why my parents were absent, I told them honestly that Ryan had a game and they had needed to be there for him. Grandpa Walt's expression when I said that was something I will remember for a long time. He was visibly angry, though he kept it contained for the evening. After the reception, Daniel and I left for our honeymoon and were completely unreachable for 2 weeks, no phones, no social media, nothing. We came home to a disaster. The moment I turned my phone back on, notifications flooded in faster than I could process them. The majority were from Sandra and Ryan. Ryan had sent a string of messages calling me names I won't repeat. Sandra's messages started hostile and threatening and gradually shifted into extended pity sessions. My father's were quieter and harder to read. What had happened while we were gone was this: One of my paternal aunts had posted the wedding photos on Facebook with a caption that made it unmistakably clear my parents had skipped their daughter's wedding. The post spread through their church community rapidly, and Sandra and Paul had been publicly shamed for it. On top of that, Grandpa Walt had traveled to their home and said things to my father, his son, that apparently shook Paul more deeply than anything had in years. My father, who had spent decades choosing passivity over accountability, had reached some kind of breaking point. He was now threatening divorce unless Sandra found a way to genuinely make things right with me. My family fractured into three distinct positions almost immediately. The majority, particularly my paternal relatives, stood firmly by my side. My maternal aunts contacted me to say I had behaved selfishly by not making my wedding more explicit to Sandra, because now she was supposedly devastated. My maternal grandparents took a similar line, insisting I owed my mother forgiveness given that she had apologized via text. My closest friends told me to ignore all of them. So, Ada for not going out of my way to remind them it was a wedding after they had already told me they couldn't come. And Ada for feeling absolutely nothing when I found out they spent that weekend at a theme park instead. Edit. Thank you so much for the feedback and the support. It has been genuinely overwhelming in the best way. I want to address the questions that kept coming up, because a few things need clarification. Yes, I did inform my parents about the wedding. I sent formal invitations to their address and received confirmation of delivery. I also followed up by text when I did not hear back. They left me on read. Given everything I had on my plate and the history I had with them, I did not feel it was my responsibility to chase them further. I did not announce the date repeatedly because Sandra had already told me they could not come due to Ryan's game, and every time in the past when I had tried to emphasize my own events, I was told I was being dramatic and that some things were simply more important than me. I reached a point where continuing to ask felt like begging. I did not keep the wedding secret from everyone. I talked about venues and dress appointments openly with my paternal aunts, including in rooms where Sandra was present. She smiled and said, "How lovely," and then changed the subject every single time. She was not unaware that something was being planned. She simply did not care enough to ask what it was. The reason I maintained contact with my parents despite everything is that every previous attempt at cutting them off had resulted in sustained harassment from Sandra, Ryan, my maternal aunts, and my maternal grandparents, who collectively made my life miserable until I relented. I had tried after my undergraduate graduation and again after my graduate degree, both of which they missed for Ryan-related reasons, and both times I was shamed back into contact. Having Daniel beside me now has changed things. I feel steadier than I ever have, but I want to be honest about why it took this long. My parents do not know my current address. Ryan once broke into my previous apartment looking for cash, and Sandra defended him by saying siblings were supposed to share with each other. I moved shortly after and made sure they would not be able to find the new place. And one more thing I need to clarify, because it came out during the meeting I will describe shortly. My parents did not actually attend Ryan's basketball game that weekend. There was no game. There had been no game at several other events they had claimed as conflicts in the past. They had simply used Ryan's schedule as a convenient excuse and, knowing that Daniel and I follow soccer and not basketball, assumed we would never be able to verify it. That particular weekend, they had taken Ryan to a theme park because he wanted to go. They had apparently been doing versions of this for months. I want to ask you something before I get into the update. If you were in my position, if you had sent the invitation, followed up by text, mentioned the event in person, and still been told there was a conflict, would you have pushed harder? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Let me know in the comments, because I have genuinely gone back and forth on this and I still do not have a clean answer. Update. After a few days of processing everything, I had a long conversation with Daniel about how to move forward. He was honest with me in the way that only someone who loves you can be honest. He pointed out that my pattern of maintaining contact despite the damage it caused me was not something I had ever been able to sustain without it costing me something real. I knew he was right. I had stayed in contact all this time because some part of me was still hoping for approval I was never going to receive, and I needed to stop letting that hope make decisions on my behalf. I messaged my father and told him that if he wanted to talk, I was willing to meet him, Sandra, and Ryan in a neutral location. He replied immediately and agreed. We met at a park near my part of the city, and my father's siblings came along, I think partly to ensure the conversation stayed in bounds. My father looked like he had not slept in days. Sandra looked angry beneath whatever composure she was trying to project. Ryan looked like he was there under protest. I told them what their behavior had cost me over the years, every missed event, the money that had been redirected without my knowledge, the years of being made to feel secondary in my own family. My father's sister shut Sandra down each time she tried to interrupt, which was more than once. When I asked them why they had treated me this way, my father cried and apologized without actually answering. My uncle, who had little patience left for him, told him directly that an apology without an explanation was worthless. Sandra sat quietly for a while and then said, in a tone that seemed almost relieved to finally be saying it out loud, that she had simply never particularly liked me. Ryan said he had always found the whole dynamic entertaining and had enjoyed watching me struggle. When I asked about the invitation, they said they had never received one. I showed them the follow-up texts. They said those had not come through either. And then the actual explanation emerged, because Ryan, apparently deciding that there was nothing left to protect, volunteered it himself. He had been visiting their house the weekend the invitations arrived, had seen mine, destroyed it, and deleted my texts from the family group chat before my parents could see them. He said this with a shrug. He said the wedding had not seemed important enough to bother passing along. My parents' reaction to this surprised me slightly. They were genuinely upset with him, or at least performed upset convincingly. Ryan responded by throwing a tantrum and crying in the way he always had when consequences appeared, and Sandra's instinct, despite everything, was to reach toward managing it. She began saying it was all a misunderstanding and that what mattered now was clearing the family's name publicly. That is when I lost whatever patience I had left. I told my father clearly that he had spent 23 years watching what was happening and choosing to say nothing, and that his tears now were the least useful thing he had ever offered me. I told Ryan what I thought of him without softening any of it. I told Sandra that being the kind of mother who watches her daughter grow up and decides she simply does not like her and then hides it for decades under the cover of favoritism is a particular kind of cruelty, and that she did not get to suddenly declare the matter resolved because the public attention was becoming inconvenient. Sandra stood up and tried to shout over me. I told her to sit down and let me finish. I do not remember everything I said after that point. I know the park around us went quiet. I know I told all three of them I was done, that I was walking away from this and not coming back, and that they should think carefully before attempting to contact me again. Then I picked up my bag and walked out with Daniel, and our friends Anna and Greg, leaving my parents and Ryan with my aunts and uncle. I had a panic attack in the car. Daniel was driving, and Anna stayed with me until we pulled over and I was able to breathe properly again. Once home, I got into bed and did not move for a long time. In the days that followed, I collected every hostile and manipulative message Sandra had sent me over the years and forwarded the folder to the woman who runs the church community organization my mother had spent years to become a part of. It is a close-knit, fairly unforgiving community, and the information spread from there into the broader social fabric of their small town with a speed that told me plenty of people had been waiting for exactly this kind of confirmation. The consequences for Sandra were significant and swift. My maternal relatives who reached out to scold me for hurting Sandra's feelings received one response. I told them they were welcome to their opinions and that any further messages designed to pressure me would be forwarded to their employers and spouses. Then I blocked all of them, including my maternal grandparents. My father sent a longer message. He said he knew he had failed me, that he was planning to leave Sandra regardless of what I decided about a relationship with him, and that he hoped someday I would be willing to give him the chance to be better. I replied that I appreciated him saying so and that I did not currently want contact with him, and that I found it difficult to trust the sincerity of a man who had found it convenient to look away for most of my life. Then I blocked him too. His instinct to distance himself from Sandra now that things had collapsed is understandable but also exactly the kind of move I am not interested in rewarding. Ryan sent more messages. I did not read them. Sandra sent a lengthy pity message about what was happening to her social standing in her marriage. I replied with one word and blocked her. Grandpa Walt has been staying with us since then. He is the best person I know and I am grateful every day that he exists. He has been reading the comments people leave about this situation and insisting he is not at all interested in what strangers on the internet think of him, while very clearly being pleased that people are on my side. Daniel has been steady and warm in the way he always is, and I have started therapy, which I should have done years ago. The therapist is helping me work through the gap between knowing something intellectually and actually being free of it emotionally, because knowing that chasing approval from people who will never give it is destructive, and genuinely stopping the chase, are two different things that require different kinds of work. Things are quiet now. That is a new feeling, and I am still getting used to it. I do want to ask you one last thing, and I mean it sincerely. Was I wrong to block my father too? He is the one who reached out, who admitted he failed me, who said he would leave Sandra regardless of what I decided. Some people in my life think I was too hard on him. Others say he had 23 years to be a father and chose not to be every single time it mattered. I genuinely do not know where I land on this, and I would like to hear what you think. I do want to ask you one last thing, and I mean it sincerely. Was I wrong to block my father too? He is the one who reached out, who admitted he failed me, who said he would leave Sandra regardless of what I decided. Some people in my life think I was too hard on him. Others say he had 23 years to be a father and chose not to be every single time it mattered. I genuinely do not know where I land on this, and I would like to hear what you think.